Alrighty, so welcome to TAM Lab number 15. Today we're going to be going through a deployment and configuration ops vRealize Orchestrator Management Pack, which is relatively new. So we did have a different session planned for today, so I'm kind of scrambling to get this going. So it should be interesting, but I think it'll be a good session here. So real quick from an agenda, I'm going to make the assumption that your customers are already using vROps, so I already have that installed, but I don't have vRO, so we'll get to go through that process. I'm going to spin up a vRO appliance, which shouldn't take too long. We'll configure the management pack, and I'll import a vRO workflow that's already existing in vRO out of the box. We'll test that, and then hopefully we'll have some time afterwards to do some automated stuff, which should be pretty. All right, so let's get rid of PowerPoint and we'll just jump right in here. So here's my lab. I do have vROps already installed, so I'm going to jump into that real quick. I spun this up last night. It seems like I spin up a new vROps every couple of weeks or so just because I like to play around in there. But I connect this to my vCenters. So if we look, I've got two vCenters. And really, that's all I did. So I spun up a new instance and I connected it to vCenter. So we should have some metrics in here from last night, from about 12 hours ago. So first off, I'm going to deploy vRO. So let's get that going. By the way, these are meant to be interactive. So feel free to unmute yourself if you've got questions or comments. And I don't just want this to be me talking for the whole hour here. So while I'm doing this, curious, are any of your customers leveraging the vRO management pack with vROps today? Do you think they have a use case for it? Just curious from the field here. Nobody? Do any of your customers use vRO outside of VRA?
No, only with VRA.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the good thing is this management pack works with the embedded vRO from VRA, so they don't have to spin up a separate one. Sure. So I've already got my DNS name set up, and I have an IP ready for this. Okay. All right, so that should be good. All right, so while that vRO appliance is deploying, I'm going to go out to our Solutions Exchange here, and I'm going to download the management pack. So if you've never been to the Solutions Exchange, there's a bunch of stuff in here, and I find the easiest way to filter is by the content type. So I'm going to go by vRealize Operations Management Pack first of all, and you'll also notice there's a lot of stuff in here from Blue Medora. And this particular management pack is a VMware management pack, so I'm going to only show the VMware ones. And that helps filter it down quite a bit. So we should be looking for one in here for the vRealize Orchestrator Management Pack, which I think is at the bottom here. Yeah, this one right here. So you will need to log in. Oh, I must already be logged in. So you'll just need a My VMware account to download it. So that's downloaded. Let's check our deployment of vRO. Almost done. All right, so let's start up vRO. All right, so while that's starting up the first time, let's go over to vROps and we'll install the management pack here. So if you come into administration and solutions and click the little plus sign, we're going to browse to that pack file that we just downloaded. And we'll upload that. All right, so VRO is up. So I'm going to go to, let's see, I think it's the third one here, 8281 VCO. All right, so first of all, let's go to Control Center. I'm going to log in as root here. And I need to do a little bit of initial config. So it's picked up the host name, that's fine. I'm going to click next. And now it wants to know the authentication provider. So I'm going to choose vSphere. I'm going to point it to my vCenter server. And I need to accept the certificate. And now it wants the username. So I'm just going to use administrator at vsphere.local. Typically, you will want to use something different here. And then it wants to bind to an admin group. So if we just do a quick search for administrators, it should see all the groups within vCenter. So I'll just say anybody in vsphere.local/administrators can leverage vRO. All right. So we should be good to go there. Let me log into vRO. So I have the client installed here. Make sure this works. So that worked. Let's see. Sometimes it takes a minute. Oops. Maybe I got to do vSphere.local. Oh, we'll give that a minute. Sometimes.
8283 though?
Was it 83? Is that where I screwed up?
Well, that's the URL above. I'm not sure what was the.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think 8283 is for managing it. It's like 5480 for the other appliances. And the 81 is what you do to actually
okay.
workflow.
Got ya.
Current node is not active. I think it's just restarting after I configure the authentication. So we'll give it a sec here. This is a nice new interface, though. I don't know. I haven't really played around with vRO for a while. Not active. There we go. So I guess it takes a second after you configure the authentication because it must restart the service. All right, so vRO is up. So let's go back to vRealize operations. I can close that. And let's configure the adapter. So I'm going to point it to my vRO server. And port should be 8281. And we want to set auto discovery to true. That way it's going to find any workflows that are already within there. And we'll give it a credential. Actually, I don't know if I need the vSphere.local. All right, so that's successful. And advanced settings should be fine. So we'll click save. And OK, and close. Now it's going to go find any workflows that it can within vRO. So that could take a couple minutes. So we may have to wait here. But if we go over to dashboards right away, we should be able to see we have a new dashboard called vRealize Orchestrator Workflows Overview. Here you can see our instance, and it doesn't see any workflows yet, but it will start populating this in the next couple minutes here. And then we'll get a health. That should come up here in a minute too. So let's see, we did that. So the first thing we'll need to do, and I think we can do it right from here under actions, we need to add a vCenter instance to vRO. And we can either do it from here, from the dashboard, or if we go to environment, and we have a new section here for the vRO. So if we click on that, click on the menu, we can also do it here from actions, right? And what that's going to do is if we go back to vRO, under the vSphere section here, it's going to add an instance, right? So I'm going to add one of my vCenter instances. We'll do it through vROps, and then I'll add the other one directly through vRO, and I'll just show you the different ways you can do it here. So first off, I'm going to go add a vCenter instance, and we need to put in our vCenter server and username. I'll just use administrator vSphere.local. I'm going to ignore the certificate. I don't know about those. We'll see if this works. Actually, before I do that, let me go back to vRO. And where is it? Here we go. I think I can get those values from here. PBM, SD. HTTP port, I guess that's 443. So I'm not going to do it here through vRO. Let's see if this works. So I'll click begin action. And then it's going to trigger the workflow to run within vRO. So we'll be able to go back to vRO and see that it's doing it. So if we come in here, we'll do a refresh. There, it succeeded. So it was pretty fast, right? So it added the vCenter instance. And now if we go back to inventory and do a refresh, we should see that instance here, which we do. And we can see our data center objects. So pretty straightforward. Like I said, the other way to do it would be to go to workflows here. And like we kind of had started, right click this add a vCenter instance, start it, and just fill in all the details. It would do the exact same thing, right? So the reason we need to do that, so if we come into environment here and we go to hosts and clusters and we go to, let's say the vCenter that I just added, click on a host for instance, we should start seeing all the actions from vRO available here. And we won't see it for the other vCenter because we haven't added that as a vCenter instance yet in vRO. So those are some of the requirements, right? So if you notice, these are the default actions that we get out of the box with vROps. If we give it just a couple minutes here, we should see a whole bunch more that it's picking up from vRO. So let's go back to our dashboards real quick. I may have to refresh this. Let me log out real quick and log back in. I'll probably do a better job though. All right, so now you can see we've got workflows here. So if I go back to environment and I drill down into that vCenter, we'll pick a VM. Notice we've got all sorts of other things here, right? So we can add a new VNIC, we can manage snapshots, we can migrate it, right? It's picking up all sorts of stuff from vRO. Now what I want to do is bring in another workflow from vRO, the reboot guest OS one specifically, right? That was one that I had as a use case for my customer maybe back in October. And John Diaz actually wrote a blog like showing how to do it. So it kind of, it was a use case that I actually had with my customer. So I'll show you how to do that here. So if we go to dashboards, back to our vRO dashboard here, select our instance and go to actions. Now we can create and modify a workflow action on vCenter resources. So here's all the ones that are out of the box that it hasn't imported, right? And there's a lot of them. So this is without even having created anything custom in vRO. This is just stuff that's already supported out of the box, which is fantastic. So if we scroll down, there should be a reboot guest OS here somewhere. Yeah, right here. So we're going to import this, and the resource type will be applicable for virtual machines. And the operation I want to do is add this, right? So I'll click begin, give that a few minutes, and then we should see that now as a new action that we can take on virtual machines. And by the way, if we go over to administration and history, recent tasks, we should see these things that we do. So you'll also see it, some of these in vRO, right, as they run as vRO workflows. But this is just kind of a nice history of any actions that we did. So we're importing this. It says it completed already. So if we go back to that VM that I had, utility, go to actions. It's not there yet. Sometimes it takes a couple minutes. Let me log out and back in. Maybe that'll help. Are there any questions while we're kind of poking around in here? Anybody have any thoughts or feedback?
So I can see the reboot, but there's a lot of other stuff on there that they're probably not going to want the people who monitor vROps to do. So how can you take away those other options that got imported in?
Yeah, so it all comes down to permission. So that's where it gets a little bit more in depth as far as locking down what users can and cannot do. And it comes into when you create your roles in your groups. So if we create a custom role here, name it Chris Binger, and go down to permissions and edit under, where is it? There's an action section in here where you can actually specify which things they can and can't do. Action, right? That's where everything shows up, and it's going to show up here for the reboot that we just imported. It might actually show up under a VRO. Let's see here, maybe. I forget. It's all through permissions, right? You just got to get kind of creative with it.
All right.
Let's see if it shows up now. Not yet. There is one, by the way, out of the box that we didn't even have to add called VM Power Operation. It's a little bit more, there's a couple more steps that you got to go through. So now we can power off, power on, and reboot. The one that we just imported is just going to reboot. So there's no variables you need to put in, right? So let me do this. Yeah, it can take a couple minutes for it to show up. But what I'll do is I'll log into that VM and we'll actually do a reboot. And then I want to set up an automated action to have it reboot automatically. So let me log out and try log in again here. There we go. So there it is right there, right? So I'm RDP'd in. We're going to go actions, reboot, and begin action. It says it can take up to 5 minutes, but you'll notice in the background it's already done it, right? So it's rebooting right now. And if we look at it, we can watch it boot up. So it's pretty fast. So we've still got a half hour. So I'm going to go through the process of actually setting up this action that we just imported as a automated action, right? So I've heard use cases from customers that say, basically, I've got this VM, and for whatever reason, the CPU spikes every once in a while, and we don't know why, and all we want to do is reboot it just to get it back to normal, right? So obviously, that's not the ideal way to fix it, but let's say there's some app on there, and it has a memory leak or whatever, and it just spikes the CPU, and they don't care about it. All they want to do is reboot it when that happens, right? So that's what I'm going to go through and show you here. So right out of the box in vROps, we have some alert definitions and some symptom definitions all around CPU spiked, right? So first of all, let's look at the symptom definition. So if we do a quick filter for CPU, this one, let's see, virtual machine, CPU, sustained CPU usage is 100%. So we can leverage this one. I'm going to change it a bit. I wouldn't do this in production, but by default, it's waiting 6 cycle times before it actually triggers this as an alert, because it doesn't want to basically start flapping, right? So if you have a VM that has 100% CPU, it may actually be doing something, and you don't want to get alerts all the time, right? So it's basically waiting 6 cycle periods before it alerts you, which by default is every 5 minutes. So that's what, 30 minutes, right? So I wouldn't change this in production, but just for our sake today, so we don't have to wait 30 minutes for this to happen, I'm going to change it to 1 cycle, right? So we'll click save on that. And then I'm going to create a new recommendation, and we'll call it automated reboot of VM. And the adapter type is going to be our vRO adapter. And the action is reboot guest OS. So we'll click save. So we've modified our symptom definition, and we created a new recommendation. So let's go to the alert definitions. And alert definitions are essentially made up of symptom definitions and recommendations, right? So there's one in here by default. If we look for CPU, virtual machine has, where is it? Here, right there. So it's at 100% for an extended period of time. It's not really extended because we changed that to just 1 collection cycle, but normally that would be true, right? So I'm going to come in here, and it's already got a couple recommendations, but I'm going to add that new one that we just created. So if I do a quick filter for reboot, and I'm going to drop it in, and we'll click save. So that's essentially everything we need to do, but we still don't have it automated because we need to enable the automated action within the policy. And you probably don't want to do that for your default policy, right? Because then it's going to reboot any VM that happens to have CPU over 100% for whatever threshold we specify. So what I'm going to do is create a custom group that includes that VM and then create a new policy for it. So first, let's create the policy. So if we go over to administration and policies, policy library, I'm going to create a new one here, and I'm going to base it off of the old one. So we'll call this utility VM. It's based off of my default vROps policy, which is fine. And we can keep everything the same except for under alert and symptom definitions. So if I make this bigger, do a filter for CPU, and then find our alert definition. So here it is. Why is that not inheriting it? Add alert definition. So I should be able to make that automated. Why am I forgetting how to do that? I must have missed a step here. Hold on. That's correct. That's fine. Maybe we need to move this up. Let's try that. Oops, not edit. Create a new one. There we go. So I guess I had to have that as the first recommendation. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this automate the action with associated with this alert definition to local. That means it's going to automatically reboot. So we'll click save. And now we have a new policy. So the last step here is I'm going to come into environment and create a new custom group. And we'll call this utility VM. And we'll say it's an environment, group type, and we're going to choose our new policy. And remember, you can add multiple objects to a group, but in this case, we're just going to have it be a single VM, so I don't need to define any group criteria there. I'm just going to find that one VM, and I'll move it over. So this one VM now has that policy, and it's in that custom group. So that's pretty much it. So let me do this real quick. We're going to RDP back into it. And I have a little batch file on the desktop that basically just spikes the CPU at 100%. So we'll simulate what we want here. So if we look at the batch file, it's pretty straightforward. It just goes through a loop and it pegs the CPU. So I'm going to run that. In the background here, you can see the CPU jump up. So it's going to take a minute or two before vROps notices this, right, as a symptom, because, like I said, the default collection is every 5 minutes. So we can come in and watch this if we go to utility, metrics, utilization, CPU usage. And we'll do it just for the last hour. So we should get another collection here pretty soon. So this might actually only take a minute or two. So while that's waiting, I'm going to go back to vRO real quick, and I'm going to add my other vCenter instance here, just so I can show you what that looks like. So we're going to go into our workflows, library, vCenter, configuration, add a vCenter server instance. We'll start the workflow. I'm going to add my other one here. And do I want to ignore the cert warnings? Yes. Give it credentials. And those endpoints are correct. So I'll click submit. And we can watch it go through the workflow. And hopefully that'll work. So we got the green check, which means it's good. And if we go over to our inventory, do a refresh, we should now see both of them here, which we do. So now if we come back into vROps, it might take a minute, but if we browse down into that vCenter and choose an object in there, like a VM, and go to actions, notice we don't have any of those vRO actions yet. That's because we just added the instance. So if we give it a couple minutes, we should now see all the available vRO workflows, like we do over here under this vCenter. All right, I think we're gonna have to wait like another 5 minutes here, because it does do a roll up for every 5 minutes. So at the next one, it should be spiked at 100 and it should reboot. And we'll watch it in the background here. That was pretty much all I had planned for today. Obviously, if you are savvy with vRO, you can come in and write your own workflows and do anything you want and even automate it like we just did here. So I'm not much of a vRO guru, so I could maybe hack something together, but it would take me a while, and I'd probably have to copy a bunch of code from somebody else. So there was one request to see if there was a way to automate the restart of a process or a service within a VM, and I haven't had a chance to dig into that. I think that is a workflow that's already included in vRO, but I haven't been able to find it here, so I'm going to poke around for that while we're waiting. Does anybody have any comments or questions or feedback? So you can upgrade tools. There's just a ton of stuff here. I wonder if there's a way to search here. You guys are quiet today. I probably should have started this this batch file a while ago, so we wouldn't have to wait so long here. So we could kill a process in the guest, kill a bad process in the guest. That's an interesting one. So it looks like you would have to provide the credentials to get into the VM to be able to do this. Is anybody on the call here pretty good with vRO? Not so much.
This is a new product for me. It's very cool. Do you have a specific training other than what you're doing here that you recommend?
I don't. There's a couple good blogs. By the way, our VM just rebooted there. So I do a refresh, it should show it's at 100%. And you'll notice in the background it rebooted. And we can watch it boot up. Obviously, you wouldn't want it to reboot as soon as it sees it at 100%, right? We just lowered that threshold, so we didn't have to wait so long. But it worked. So back to your question, though. Yeah, there's a couple blogs that John has written that kind of outline exactly what I've done here today. And like I said, they're going to be doing a CMBU enablement session on Monday. I think they do that at 8 a.m. or somewhere that's Pacific time, in that time range. So he'll probably do some other things, besides what I've done here today. So I can definitely put those links to the blogs in the recording. Let me put it in chat right now, actually. So this one here is a good one. This is the one that actually was my question that I put out on Socialcast, and John responded to it within like 2 hours and had a blog written. It was ridiculous. So there's that one. And then this one kind of goes through the installation of the management pack and getting some other workflows imported, which is nice. And it also has other links within it to related blogs as well. So check that out. But that's pretty much all I had. We finished ahead of time. I thought this was going to take a little bit longer, but I guess not. Anybody else have any other questions or thoughts? Otherwise, we can end it early. All right. Well, then I'll give you back 13 minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks everyone for joining. Have a
Thank
good
you.
week.
Thank you.
All right, take care.